Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast brought to you by RaceForThePrize.com. That's where you can get access to the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App the money my way, and I'll share the folder and all the sheets and all the data that will help you play trucks, cups, you name it. Xfinity this week, trucks. Short track racing again after the break. We are at Richmond. The previous race was at IRP. Maybe a little bit more banking at IRP, but still the same short track style of racing. We expect the superstars from that race to continue their dominant ways. And we have seen that trend since Richmond has returned and IRP has jumped onto the schedule. Richmond, IRP, two really good races. And for us, they were back to back. So that makes life pretty easy. And then also making life easy predicting who's going to be a dominator or more so a hog who cycles to the lead. It's been the same guys all year. It's been Heim time. It's been Eckes. I give a gentle lean towards Eckes at the shorter tracks, IRP, Martinsville, but that doesn't mean that Heim can't run at short tracks. He will be fine. He ran plenty of short tracks and raced well in the ARCA series. He's doing great this year. He arguably has the best truck, a seasoned crew chief in Scott Zipadelli. If I had to pick, though, it's Eckes. Now, I don't even really feel like I need to pick between two of them, but I will roster plenty of them. At $10,000 doesn't matter. There's plenty of laps in this race. Ty Majeski is the guy, right? Where Heim and Eckes can definitely run away with the show at intermediate tracks or all the other dispersed tracks at the schedule. Diverse, not disperse. Diverse, dispersed. Ty Majeski, late model legend, iRacing legend, who cares about that? But awesome at the short tracks, still running well at short tracks on his off nights, competing against some of the best short track racers in America. And of course, at IRP, 32 hog points, even has a pass-through penalty and still overcomes it. You can see he finished second and third in the last two Richmond races, 79. That's dominator points. 37, maybe even dominator points there. So Majeski's at the top of the list. Don't rule out Grant Enfinger either, who also just came off a pretty good IRP race. Now, later in the podcast, if we have time, we'll look at IRP practice and compare it to where they finished. And we'll also look at some optimal lineups. But where I stand, easily, I need two hogs or dominators. And more than likely, three. Just the way the racing cycles around. Unless you think Majeski's going to put on another majestic show and you only want to take one and maybe pair him with an Eckes or an Enfinger, that's fine. But we're looking 2 to 3, and I don't think it's going to be too many guys that come from outside of this group. Sanchez, more of an intermediate track driver for me. Very solid, top 10s every week, having a good season, but not in the class that Eckes, Heim, Majeski, and Enfinger. Now, I know I'm giving Enfinger a lot of credit, but this is a track where he can succeed, and his CR7, the robot truck, is allied with McAnally, and McAnally had speed at IRP across the board. And it seems like as this team is growing, they are getting more connection to McAnally, and I think even Enfinger had mentioned that before, where they're getting more access to the alliance, the data, and the results are improving. He's right there. I mean, you look at 21 and 20, pretty strong rides. And I'll make a strong case that as this team develops at CR7 or Robaugh, McAnally, whatever, this truck is very close to some of the equipment he had toward the end of his tenure. You know, in 2020, Thor and Enfinger weren't on the greatest terms. They didn't really have the greatest trucks. Same thing in 21 when he was at GMS. I mean, they were good. You could make a strong argument that the truck that he will be driving this week was just as good as any of the trucks that he had in these last four races. Now, 2019, when he was the points season leader, probably had pretty good equipment. But as far as Richmond goes, short track racing goes, I think that CR7's right there with him. Zilich, been a big fan. Talked him up for quite a while. Loved him in the MX5 series for the last couple seasons. I think back to 2021, 22. Very exciting to see him as a 15-year-old winning races. Won Daytona 24s. Won at Sebring this year in another 12-hour race. Or is that 24 hours too? Late models. ARCA wins. Kid does it all, has been signed to Junior Motorsports. This is his first opportunity, and it's a good opportunity to aspire, but $9,700? It's going to be tough to get there. We know he's a whiz kid, but boy, it's not going to be easy to unseat Majeski, Heim, Eka, Senfinger. And at this price, he really needs to lead laps. It's going to be fun to root for him. We're all pulling for him. Everybody's a Connor Zilic super fan now. Who doesn't like a guy that wins in all different types of racing? That's why people love Kyle Larson. You throw him in any ride, and he is a wheel man. Connor Zilic is the next. I mean, I don't even think the hype train has picked up fully enough, but it will. At the price, it's just going to be hard to roster him in DFS. Fun story. Can't wait for this thing to go year after year. But right now, at 9,700, I don't know. First truck ride, if he goes in there, I know he did have a truck ride in Coda, and that was pretty thrilling, right? You see him battle adversity. We'll see how he does it short. Now, obviously, he's comfortable with this type of racing, these types of tracks, but who knows? I mean, he has been Superman so far. Rajah Caruth, top 10 driver. Don't think I'd go 9,400 for Rajah. The only way I'm going to Rajah, and even Taylor Gray and Tyler Ankrum, who are all having pretty good seasons, top 10 drivers, very solid equipment, they've got to, at the very least, give me double-digit place differential, and even then, I might need more than that. Because their price is not cheap, and I know I want to get at least two of these drivers. It'll be very difficult to roster Caruth, Gray, or Ankrum unless they are offering close to 15 to 20 place differential points. And maybe you can extend that conversation with Ben Rhodes, and I would argue that Rhodes is maybe not in as good equipment. Like I said, the McAnally trucks were good. Tricon's always good. It's also got Jeff Hensley as the crew chief. Who was the crew chief? Taylor Gray for Brett Enfinger in 2020. And then in the actual Richmond race before that in the Truck Series was way back in 2005. Mike Skinner wins with Jeff Hensley as the crew chief, so he's got pretty good notes. But I don't think Taylor Gray is going to win this race or lead laps in this race. And at 9,200, that's tough. Caruth, that's tough. Rhodes, that's tough. Riggs, it's even tougher. But he's a late model racer. Yeah, he will develop. But let's be honest, Lane Riggs, some people may be disappointed about what he's done this year. But jumping into a new team with a new crew chief, right? This is not the crew chief that was there last season. He moved on and is having a terrific season for Justin Haley in the Cup Series. What a steal that was. So it's a pretty new team. So it's not surprising to see them struggle, but also let's put it into perspective. Look, it took Eckes several years to figure it out. Heim came around pretty quickly, but you can make an argument that when Heim entered the series, the competition was down. You didn't have Kyle Busch slaughtering people every week. You didn't have as many highly invested teams. So Heim entered during a pretty soft time, and even that being the case, it's taken him a while to develop. Majeski, really no fault of his own, starts in that cursed 60 Xfinity Series ride, had to really crawl and scrape and take any ride that he could year after year, and finally, after working in the garage with Thor, was able to get some full-time rides. And even when he first got a full-time ride, it took him a while. And you could say he's still developing because he hasn't been really a monster at the intermediate track, but at the short track. Anyway, there is a developmental arc, so we should offer that charitably to Riggs and say we don't expect much yet. 8,700 is too much. Tanner Gray, 8,500 is where we can start saying, all right, now we don't like rostering Tanner Gray, but Tanner Gray has a knack for not qualifying pretty well, so wouldn't be surprised to see him be more likely to offer 15 place differential points, differential, than Caruth, Gray, Ankrum, etc. Crafton actually had some pretty good speed in practice and in qualifying at IRP, but the results weren't that great. Where did he finish? 24th. But he was running up front for most of the race. So, possibility. If you like Tanner Gray, then you can't be too sad about considering Matt Crafton if the place differential is on the board. It's a big if because at IRP, as I mentioned, had a top 10 qualifying position. Friesen's improved. He's there, same conversation. Can he top 10? Yes. He's going to need to not qualify well at this price. And as we go down, like always, we can start being a little bit more flexible and open. And as I've mentioned plenty of times before, Chase Purdy, another young driver who is developing, you have to do your best to erase who you think Chase Purdy was. And I will once again repeat the Chase Purdy story. And that is, Purdy disappointed most of you. He was always in top tier rides over the last couple seasons and never lived up to expectations. Hindsight being 2020, we now realize that those big teams that he was racing for were all on the verge of shutting down. So equipment, crews probably weren't all that heavily invested. This is the first time that he has been invested in a team. Spire on the rise. Jason Trenchier joins the team. New crew chief working things out. And you can see they've been much more consistent in terms of running position over the last handful of races. Again, the story doesn't change. We need place differential. Maybe you get away with one of these guys in the mid-range that just scores enough fantasy points. Now, what would that scenario be, or the circumstance? It's actually pretty obvious. We talk about it all the time. So if we expect these guys up top to lead all the laps, score a bunch of fantasy points, all right, pretty much lock out the top 5 or so. Then we start to look at the rest of the drivers and say, okay, who can score points? That's the question you need to ask yourself. Who can score? Well, as we know in the truck series, equipment, talent being what it is, for the most part, the drivers who are supposed to start up front and finish up front. And thus, they don't get any place differential points, so no access to that scoring bucket. They will get finishing position points, but they also don't lead laps, run fast laps, because we've got Eckesheim and Majeski stealing all of those. So we have this huge gap of, yeah, you can pay up for finishing position, but that's all you're going to get. And so as we're building lineups, and yeah, we got to put a punt or a value play in there, but with our 2 to 3 hogs, sandwiched in the middle is a guy who doesn't really finish all that well. Maybe Chase Purdy gets you 10th. And maybe you get you 3 or 4 place differential points. But his end score is a better point per dollar play than the guy that gets a top 5 but cost you more. Because Taylor Gray will just, let's use Nick Sanchez, for example. He qualifies 8th, finishes in the top 5. Great. And then we've got a bunch of other guys who are really good, and they start up front and they finish up front. Point per dollar wise, they might score more raw fantasy points, but point per dollar wise, they don't work because this guy is just good enough, scores just enough efficiency from Chase Purdy, and he makes the lineup work because we're paying up at the top, and we got that one punt or value that slides through. So we get into a sweet spot here with Purdy. Probably not all that excited about rostering Ty Dillon, although they are running a little bit better. I just think 7,700 for Ty Dillon. I mean, we look at upside. Purdy's got top 10 upside. Ty Dillon doesn't. I mean, look. We just look at these recent races. Their rating rank, where their average running position sorted into integers. At Charlotte, Chase Purdy was the 3rd best driver versus 18th. 7th best driver rating versus 16th. 7th versus 27, 13 versus 20. I'll gladly pay the extra $100 for a better truck, a better crew chief, and a driver that I still believe goes under-owned in Chase Purdy because of past circumstances. Dean Thompson, you know the story. I don't need to repeat it over and over and over. He is a top 15 driver, sometimes a top 10 driver. But when it comes to the last lap, that's not always the case because he finds ways to wreck. IRP, though, he was clean and was able to secure that top 10 while running up front all day for Tricon. He can do it if he doesn't do the classic Dean Thompson. I mean, you can see his driver rating versus his finishes doesn't always come through. Things happen. Caden Honeycutt, back in the truck. Another one of these young drivers jumping in, late model legend. Honeycutt pretty much runs everything. Chili Bowl, dirt racing, late models, e-racing. You got Nice, you got Phil Gould, checking all those boxes. 7,300, it's more than we have had to spend for him in the past, but there's a strong argument that it's still way too cheap. I mean, Dean Thompson's going to be more expensive because he is a regular, but Caden Honeycutt has proven, and it's not just late model, whatever, back of the woods, speedway racing. The guys competed in like your Virginia Triple Crown, Hampton Heat, solid races there. William Sawalich, again, another probably too cheap Tricon truck. Plenty of short track experience from the ARCA series, should be good to go. Winning tons of ARCA races this year. Another place where I'm glad, and the situation you probably find yourself confronting with is that they're not going to start in the back. They're going to have to start up front because they're good. And you have to decide, do I want to play Caden Honeycutt or William Sawalich starting 10th? And the answer is probably going to be yes. It is kind of scary, but I don't think it's that scary. They've proven their talent. They've proven their worth. They can run and finish in the top 10. Sure, you're not going to get hog points, but you're not getting hog points from guys in the 9K range or the 8K range. Yeah, they may not get you place differential points, but the same is likely to be said of the top cars in the 9K and 8K range. If there is an obvious place differential play, shoot, go for it. But you have to pick 6 drivers. And when we're looking at upside, or at least finishing position, because often on the board for the truck series, all we're really able to do is maximize finishing position with some of these guys because they all start up front. Of course, there's always that obvious place differential play that pops up. But outside of that, we still have to roster a driver 4 or 5. And in that case, we want to save money and maximize finishing position. Honeycutt gets you there. Sawalich gets you there. Thompson, a little riskier. Dye, same thing, riskier. I mean, Dye and Thompson run every week. But a strong argument could be that Honeycutt and Sawalich are actually better. Parsons, this is where we start to get into more of the value guys. Parsons can run around 20th. Don't really get excited about it. I think that's a little too expensive for him, although the Henderson truck's been good over the years. Wouldn't completely write him off the board. Jake Garcia, probably been pretty disappointing. Very solid young career, moving up through the series. Got that ride with McAnally, now with Thor. He's just been okay. 6,700. He's going to need to offer me a little bit more place differential because he lacks the upside of these other drivers. Really surprised to see Matt Mills at 6,600. Anyone else surprised to see him more expensive than Bailey Curry? He is running better lately, but really not that much better. And I know early in the season, a lot of Mills' problems were wrecks and mechanical, and his niche truck should always be fine for the most part. And I know early in the season, I thought, oh, well, he doesn't have the same equipment as, the all-star ride with Phil Gould, who's with Honeycutt this week, or with Bailey Curry. But I think when it's all said and done, most of these niche trucks were pretty similar. It just comes down to luck and driver. Either way, I don't see why I would spend up, unless, of course, Matt Mills is starting in the back, then that is fine. Bailey Curry has been through quite a bit of an interesting season. Plenty of bad luck this year. He's still talented. The truck is still good. But the truck's been through quite a few changes if you've been paying attention. Mike Hillman Jr. left the team, joined Spencer Boyd's operation. Temporary crew chief came in, and they had a lot of mechanical failures and weren't getting good results, or something, lug nut issues or whatnot. They've again made another change. Wally Rogers takes over for Bailey Curry. Wally Rogers has been with the team. And what we'll say about Wally Rogers is he was the crew chief for Lawless Allen last year. And we came into this season thinking, oh, maybe Lawless Allen could be good. And Lawless Allen was terrible, which tells me that if Wally Rogers could get Lawless Allen to top 20 every other week at Nice, then hopefully the combination of Wally Rogers and Bailey Curry should be pretty good. Bailey Curry is not as cheap as he was at IRP when he was egregiously under 6K. He performed. I expect him to run well again. I think him and the Wally Rogers combo is going to be good. So we got 2 Connors in the back, Connor Jones and Connor Hall. Both young kids, decent experienced late models, etc. Connor Jones has been running pretty much all season off and on, temporarily with Thor. Really hasn't been that great. He's been a top 20 driver, still young, still needs more reps. His late model career is not nearly as decorated as Connor Hall, who last year won the 2023 NASCAR Weekly Series. Basically, you're just running short tracks, every week, and then they tally up who won the most of these late model, short track, whatever events. And he did it by winning like 14 races last season. Right now, he's leading in the late model standings. Now, it is his first race, but hey, it is $6,000. It is a McAnally truck, and McAnally's been very fast at IRP, so something to think about. I would definitely believe you were going to want to lean towards Connor Hall. I think he should be pretty popular. I know it's his first truck race ever, but the kid runs short tracks. It's not, I say kid, I believe he is a yacht salesman full time. And then sometimes like, all right, Tuesday night, I'm going to go win a race. And then I'm going to get back on the phone and start cold calling. Do you cold call yacht sales? Yacht sales? I don't think so. Call up. Yeah, call me up. Yeah, I'm going to buy a yacht. Got all that money laying around. Sold all these spreadsheets. I'm going to go buy a yacht. Holmes. Timmy Hill's been running pretty well. Deserved to get a little bit of credit. And is someone I think I could consider. Now, these numbers may not look good, but in comparison to the other guys in the backpack, the Lemons class, he runs in the back, but he's getting decent finishes. 19th at IRP. So he runs in the top 25 all day, stays in the lead lap, gets that 19th place finish. Or maybe he was a lap down. Either way, he's been more consistent. Good to see that truck improving. Mason Massey been very disappointing for Young. It is 5,600. Hasn't been terrible, but I like Hill better. We've learned plenty of lessons from Lawless Allen. Don't need to hear that anymore. Maggio on his own equipment, not excited. Thad Moffat's going to be, we'll see what happens. How strong his Young truck's going to be. Faction 46 sold out. Thad's in Young's equipment. Maybe something could happen here. We'll see. Moffitt wasn't terrible in the ARCA series when he had decent equipment. Wouldn't rule it out. And the rest of these jokers is not worth mentioning, although I will close with saying Justin S. Carroll wasn't terrible at Martinsville. That's all I'll say, right? Because people love to troll me for all of this guy's, they're going to pull up with the old flatbed and they'll unload. And they run late models in North Carolina. But I would rather roster him than Trey Hutchins. These local tracks, they show up and they give it a try. And again, in Martinsville, he was running almost in 25th when he got into that wreck halfway through the race. So if you're going to make me Bowman's basically just buying a ride, an old dude who has tried to buy rides in the past, never really gets into the race. It's worth exploring at 4,600. That is all I will say before the trolls come after me. That'll do it. Thanks for joining me. Have a good one.